Hello there, hope you are doing well. This video is going to be a teensy bit different in that there probably isn't going to be any lore in it, which I can hear you all cheering, thank goodness, no more boredom from Haswell. Instead, this is a topic I've been asked to talk about. In fact, I've been asked about it lots and lots of times and didn't really know how to cover it in a video, and I'm not sure I really know now, so apologies if this ends up being a bit rambling. But I am going to speak about the Metaverse. How exciting, how cool that sounds. Everyone just immediately thinks like Marvel, the multiverse. It's not that, it's something completely different. Now, the Metaverse is now something that everyone's talking about and they're very excited because of Mark Zuckerberg. You may be familiar that a few weeks ago, depending on when you're watching this of course, Mark Zuckerberg announced that they're rebranding Facebook as Meta. The company will be called Meta. Very similar in some ways to how Google, the company, rebranded itself as Alphabet. And similar things are happening actually. When that happened, everyone said, oh, Google shares are going to plummet, nobody mentioned Alphabet. Sure enough, Meta is doing very, very well indeed. Mark Zuckerberg's shares are not doing anything bad. He's got nothing to worry about. Now, there are allegations that the reason that Facebook was changing its name to Meta was to try and deal with some of the, well, I was about to say positive, negative publicity around Facebook. A lot of this comes out of whistleblowing allegations have been made. Some of it comes to the way that Facebook's been treating personal data over the years. Let's face it, Facebook's had a pretty bad rap over the last 5 years at least, and they kind of feel like they have to do something. The thing is, what they seem to be doing is not necessarily rebranding to go, look how great and a caring company we are. They're trying to essentially create what I think is a new version of what we see as the internet. So let me explain. Everyone's asking me, what is the Metaverse? What does it mean? In its vaguest form, the Metaverse is essentially an alternate reality, alternate version of the world we live in, where you can do lots of things. That sounds like something out of a sci-fi book, and it sounds like something out of Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash, which I fully recommend you read to get an idea of what could happen, or read Ready Player One, which I think is by Ernest Cline, or just watch the film if you can't be bothered to read the book, because that also deals with issues of the Metaverse and how things could work out. But in its vaguest sense, the Metaverse is just a different way of doing things online. So you take doing business into a different area, let's call it the online arena. You take communications into the online arena. In some ways, when we were all stuck in lockdown, we were kind of in lockdown operating in our very own version of the Metaverse. Now, not quite, not completely sophisticated. You didn't all have VR headsets on. But think about it. You were probably doing all of your work using Microsoft products, probably communicating through Microsoft Teams or Zoom. You may be living your social life either through online games, if you want into that, or maybe just by having Zoom drinks or something along those lines. Probably ordering all your food online too, groceries online. Everything you were doing was being done in a sort of a not quite reality universe. Now, you're still in the real world, you're still ordering things off the internet, it's not like the most exciting thing, but you are essentially moving aspects of your life into the internet metaverse, so to speak. Think how much detail we post on there now. Instagram, Facebook, pretty much any digital platform, and that's just in the West. Then you go over to China, you've got all the equivalent platforms there. The amount of stuff that gets done on WeChat. I've spoken before how WeChat, as essentially an app, has lots of sub-apps within it, and you can kind of live your whole life on WeChat. In some areas you have to in China. So we've kind of been existing in this weird metaverse already. But the thing about this metaverse is it's all run and owned by different entities. So they're not sharing data between them unless you agree to it. So if you're using Zoom, you would hope it's not using your data for anything else and sending it to, say, WeChat, and I assume that it's not. Ditto if you're using Facebook, hopefully it's not communicating with other things you're using, such as WhatsApp or Instagram. Hopefully. But whatever you're using, it's a separate thing. They're not part of one big ecosystem. You're kind of making your own metaverse, so to speak. Now, Mark Zuckerberg sees it differently. He wants to create essentially an alternate reality, and every time I say this, it sounds like something from a sci-fi movie, normally a dystopian one, but I'll come on to that. But an alternate reality, a place where we can work, we can conduct meetings, we can do all of our day-to-day business in the metaverse. We can play games on the metaverse, we can socialize in the metaverse. Kind of the way that Facebook slowly went from being a platform where wasn't it great to look at people's photos of cats to become spreading online news, became the main platform for news for lots of people, which has its own issues. It also has become a way to spread sometimes inaccurate facts, news, It's become a real problem during the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of the misinformation it spread. But Facebook went from being sort of cat videos to something big where a lot of people run their lives, and it flows over into other social media platforms too. This is what Mark Zuckerberg seems to want. So the metaverse for him is online platform, always online, where you can do everything. Everything that you would do in the real world, you can do online. You can do it in amazing surroundings if you're using VR, and I'll come into that. But essentially, it's almost a digital sandbox that actually has real life repercussions in the real world. Now, I don't know if you've ever used VR. I'll come on to this in a second. One of the biggest players in VR is Oculus, which is owned by Facebook. I dare say that this Christmas, lots of people, if they haven't already got one, will be getting an Oculus Quest 2, even though it's quite old tech now, and there'll probably be a 3 next year. I kind of want one because Resident Evil 7 VR is only on Oculus Quest 2, and the fact that I have an Oculus Rift isn't going to help me, and I can't play it because of some stupid walled garden. But hey, it's Facebook. But a lot of people are experiencing VR for the first time. So if you consider a metaverse is somewhere where you do lots of things online and you can have everything inside one platform, imagine then if it moves into virtual reality. Now, if you've ever played a VR game, you'll know that sometimes the graphics can be rather unsophisticated. I mean, if you played one in the last 5 or 6 years, not if we're going back to virtuality. If you remember that stuff that used to exist, was it in the 80s or in the 90s? It's a long time ago, where it clearly wasn't real. It was running about 15 frames per second. But you'll know if you're fighting zombies or whatever, anything that's particularly nasty might be trying to kill you, there's a palpable sense of fear and tension. It feels almost real. I played an Exorcist game using a VR headset. I won't be doing that ever again because it scared the bejesus out of me. But it does feel real. Your brain gets tricked into thinking it's real, and you're not losing, we're not talking the Lawnmower Man, to drop another sci-fi reference, you're not losing the barrier between reality and fantasy, but it does trick your brain, and it becomes something, I guess it triggers off the old brain chemicals that make you get addicted to things. Is it dopamine? It kind of triggers that in the same way that Facebook does or social media does when you're fishing for likes. So, 2 things. And I'll do the first one that I think is the likely thing that will happen first. I'll do the scary sci-fi one too. Suppose that the creation of a metaverse is successful. Suppose that Mark Zuckerberg or any other person or any other company manages to create one platform where you can do everything. And I'm not talking about in the virtual world, I'm talking everything that you do in real life, but you're using one platform for everything. Imagine if all of your work systems, all of your social systems, every internet connected thing you do is on one platform. And you might think, wow, that's so convenient, one sign-in, everything's fine. However, what happens if that one platform is bought by a company you don't like? You might not be very happy. What if it's run by a company from the beginning you don't like, but you're obliged to use it because your work's forcing you onto it? What if that your data is being shared within that entity so they can sell you anything they want, or they can use their data for whatever you want? What if you haven't read the terms and conditions, the end user license agreement, or whatever document it might be that you have to agree to get access to this metaverse, but you have no choice but to agree to it in order to use it, and you have to use it? Suddenly you may find, wasn't happy how media companies, social media companies were using my personal data. Now I'm obliged to give it to them and they can sell it. So there's that issue. There's also then the issue, what if you are suddenly blocked or charged for that metaverse entry, for use of that platform? A big issue because you're suddenly having to pay for something, or something that you have to use because everyone else is using it, similar to if you're using WeChat in China, you suddenly can't access. You suddenly find yourself as a social disadvantage. So this is one of the reasons why I'm very wary of the concept of an online metaverse. I don't like the idea, and I've never liked the idea, of one entity or one collaboration between entities having the access to essentially, or ownership of, to a certain extent, of your digital life. There is a legal issue there, finding mentions of law, in that if you don't agree to something, or they can decide how you resolve a dispute. For example, if you have a dispute with most internet platforms these days, you'll find you have to arbitrate in California, and you may not be able to do that even if they help you. But you may find that you're suddenly restricting your rights. You're not, essentially you have to use these things to do things in the real world, but you don't have access to the remedies and the things that could stop you getting into trouble in the real world. This is very, very sort of pie in the sky stuff, but bear with me. Now, I think the view of the metaverse, or the concept of the metaverse, at least if you read some of the press around it, is not as simple as just one platform where you can do everything. The actual concept is closer to those sci-fi books I was saying at the beginning. So this is Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. Again, I really recommend you read it. If you like it, read his other books too. They're also very good. They get very sciencey and very complicated as you go, but Snow Crash is a good place to start. But that has the suggestion that the metaverse would be something you all access through online VR or AR systems. So you're doing everything through a virtual reality headset, AR glasses, whatever system they have, jacking something into your back or your that's not your back, into your arm or into your neck. A little bit like the Matrix, where you would jack in and jack out unless the machines take over and you're stuck. And I know there's a new film coming out. So that, I think, is the idea. And there's been lots of talk of how you can make a load of money in the metaverse. They're talking about, oh, we can have digital real estate, so people can pay real money to have a virtual mansion that people can come and party in the metaverse. You can make a fortune by investing in the metaverse. There's an article I read recently about how now some of the big investors should be trying to make so much money from this in kind of the same way that people got into Bitcoin and turned it from being an actual currency into an investment product, turning the metaverse into essentially a virtual real estate market where rich people can make loads of money, and then you find that poor people who have to exist in the metaverse live in a ghetto. But the problem is, if you have an online only VR system metaverse that you have to use to do things, or even if you don't have to use to do things, but all of your friends are using it and all of your business contacts are using it, so you're obliged to, so you kind of do have to use it, the issues of ownership become even more scary. Now, the article I was reading, I'm not going to say where it's from because it made me really angry, said, oh, we should invest in the metaverse and spend money creating things in it because people will inevitably become addicted to it and we can make a lot of money from that, which is kind of, I think, one of the issues that people have had with Facebook. There is such a thing as internet addiction. Certainly social media causes lots of problems. Google anorexia on Instagram. See what sort of things that come up and you'll be horrified. So it's a bit scary. I love the idea as a sci-fi nerd of a virtual reality world where we can live in and we can do really exciting things and we can essentially go and play video games and fight monsters and do whatever we want to do. I can play my favorite RPGs without just having to roll a load of dice, but I can swing a virtual sword, crawl along a virtual dungeon. I've already done these things, by the way, but not in the metaverse. I really like the idea of that. I like the idea of a new medium. I do not like the idea of creating something that slowly but surely becomes an all-encompassing thing that we have to be involved in, that is run by one or two large organizations who have access to our data who can block us at any time. So, for example, suppose, I use the Matrix analogy again, suppose that you are essentially 20 years from now living your life in the metaverse. You wake up in the morning, you put on a headset, you go to the virtual office, after that you go for virtual drinks, then you play some virtual games, you watch some virtual movies at the virtual cinema. Suppose you breach the terms of use, you take essentially the red pill in the Matrix and you no longer have access to that. You're still living a very lonely life where everybody else is jacked into the metaverse and you're excluded. And I know this seems ridiculous and it seems like I'm suddenly going further and further into realms of sci-fi. And I have read a lot of dystopian fiction, but it does feel a lot like the precursors to some terrible dystopian fiction. So there's lots to discuss about this. I mean, I'm not sure at this moment that Mark Zuckerberg or anyone else who's really described the metaverse really knows what it means. But I see it, if you take away all the glitz and glamour of walking through virtual fields, fighting battles in virtual castles, flying through the virtual sky, and how exciting that is, doing business with people in a meeting room virtually so they're all sitting around a table that you're all in different places, which is very cool. But if you take that away and say, but you have one privately owned company that controls that metaverse and everything in it and decides what's allowed and what isn't, who's allowed access, who isn't, what data they take from people, then I have a big issue in terms of data and a big issue, perfectly honest, around freedom of speech, freedom of everything, really. It's quite a scary concept. Now, as a closing, and I've probably scared people off it now, either people are not having an Oculus Quest 2 for Christmas, or maybe they're buying real estate in the metaverse, just like they used to in Second Life, for those who remember Second Life. You've got the issue then that if there is a company running a metaverse where you do all of your day-to-day roles, you're not going to have the same metaverse in different jurisdictions. We do not have the same internet in different parts of the world. The internet in China is very, very different to the internet just slightly over the border here in Hong Kong. certainly different to the internet would be in the US. So you'll find you have different metaverses. You may not be allowed to go between them. You may be allowed access to one metaverse, someone can take all of your data, your biometric data, whatever data they want. You may find that citizens of one metaverse, I'm thinking China here, would never be allowed into the US metaverse unless maybe it was to post nasty comments on articles or to allege that people are horrible and generally cause trouble. The possibility in terms of hacking, people hacking, I mean, it's bad enough you get hacked now and you have all your personal data stolen. Someone hacks and destroys your entire digital life, and that's your only real life because everyone's now living in VR headsets. That's a nightmare as well. And I'm going to stop because I'm starting to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but be very wary. It's really exciting. It's one of those technologies that I think, wow, wouldn't it be? It's everything that I wanted from the future. I was obsessed as a child with Star Trek: The Next Generation, still am actually, and was obsessed with the holodeck, and the thought that the metaverse could be equivalent of a holodeck is great. But I always remembered those episodes of Star Trek where the holodeck went wrong and something escaped from it, or people got trapped in it, and that everyone had to run around the Starship Enterprise solving the problem. I can't help feeling that if you have a big organization like Facebook or anyone else, Facebook or Tencent or regardless, running one big platform that everyone is using all of the time and they have to use and they can't get away from it, at some point something will escape and it will go wrong. Anyway, that's enough from me. Virtually no lore in that one. More sci-fi than anything else. If anyone's got any recommendations for sci-fi novels, then do let me know. I am very excited about the new Matrix film, but I have a horrible feeling it might suck, similar to the Ghostbusters one. But do watch actually what happens in Ready Player One, where people are essentially selling themselves just to take part in a virtual online world, because that may be the future that Mark Zuckerberg, the Metaverse, and all those proponents have in mind. Who knows? It's all very scary, but it's also all really cool, isn't it? But very scary, cool. Scary, cool. Anyway, don't have nightmares. I'll be back very soon. In the meantime, have a great one and take care.